All right, base coat of the Chupacabra. Base coat is done. Trying out a different kind of format today. Some would say I've been inspired by the recent blogs in this hobby that have been going up, and those who would say that would be right. I'm not planning on indefinitely doing daily vlogs, but I did want to do a sort of retrospective video on my Zombicide series. I posted the playthrough last week, and I posted the build of the board back earlier in the spring. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit. I thought this would be a good format to do that. But I'm not just gonna be talking. I also have a few extra minis for the game. This is sort of the last little bit of stuff that I haven't made for this game yet. These are some additional abominations. These are the big bad bosses, and they're pretty cool. This one's a chupacabra, little alien. This one has like the weirdest pose. I don't really get it. So yeah, I'm gonna paint these minis on camera, and I'm gonna talk about Zombicide. Now, I am not a hugely experienced painter. I do have quite a bit of paints though. These are a lot of metallics and contrast paints from Citadel. Got a bunch of speed paints. This is what I'm hoping to use a little bit more in today's video. This is, you know, some just Army Painter war paints that I don't really get a lot of use out of. I will get to the zombie stuff, I swear. My approach to mini painting has always been pretty like, you know, I want it to look good. I know there's a huge difference between like a golden demon winning miniature and like what's just considered table ready. And there's obviously a huge range just in between those two goalposts. I'm definitely on the closer to table ready side of that. Do they look good on the table? Great. I think it's really easy to compare yourself to like all the really well-known mini painters in the hobby and golden demon entries, but that's not realistic for everybody. I did prime these, and as you can kind of see, I didn't do a great job. I'm still learning how to use the airbrush. So you can see the paint kind of pooled in the recesses, but I don't want that for the white. Like I did a spray of black, which looked great. And then I tried to do a very heavy zenithal highlight because I want to do some speed painting. But it was too thin, but I mean, in general, I'm not super worried about it. I'm just going to start painting. I'm gonna start with Forest Sprite speed paint. So yeah, my approach is always speed paint as a base. I do like to go in and add some more highlights and details with some more Army Painter paints or whatever paints. I do like to add washes in the end. I rely on speed paints like for like 80% of it. And then I do sort of try to go in and add a little bit more detail. All right, so now that I got the paints going, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Zombicide. The number one question I got from people about the Zombicide thing is where do I store all of it? Well, I don't have an elegant solution. That's what I told everybody who asked that. I, quite frankly, didn't even think about it. I hate to admit that when I started the project. My husband and I live in a fairly small, not oppressively so, but fairly small apartment. We do have a storage unit. Temperature control in there is not ideal for arts and crafts and things I care about. So I didn't really want to leave them in there. What I did end up doing, and thank you to Richard for, you know, agreeing to this. He was very happy to let me put them in our living room. They take up the entire shelf, and we had to move, therefore, everything that was on that shelf. I'm probably not going to keep them there forever. I have the playthrough that I posted. That was truly the first game I played of that. I'd like to get it to the table a couple more times with some other friends who showed some interest, but after that, I don't know. I might have to put them in the storage unit, maybe in some nice boxes. I don't really have room in this room. I won't be able to fit another project like that in this apartment. So it is something to consider. This is like 90% of what I do when I'm filming these. It's just fiddling with this camera arm. Speed paints are great for speed and for getting something to look nice. I'm a big fan. I know professional like mini painters might not use them as much because the demographic of speed paints is more for people who aren't, you know, entering the Golden Demon and are just trying to get stuff table ready. But they're not necessarily easy. You gotta be careful. Like with full opacity paints, with base coats, you can be pretty loose with it. But with speed paints, you're going over white. These are very thin paints just by the nature of how they're formulated to do what they do. If you're using exclusively speed paints across the whole model, you do need to be careful because they don't have the body and the pigmentation by design to cover other paints up. So this is not me saying that it's harder to use speed paints than it is to do like high level technical painting on a mini. I'm not saying that at all. But you can achieve some really nice results with speed paints and kind of at least as a base if you kind of have different approaches to different areas. And it's not, if you're trying to do a good job, it's not like you're just pressing a button and you're done. And I say that as a good thing. You know, let's not gatekeep our hobbies. I would hate for someone who's starting out and, you know, wants to use speed paints to hear someone talk down about speed paints and it doesn't make you a real painter. It exists across the internet in general. Gatekeeping, you're not good enough if you use these, like, I'm a big board gamer. There's a lot of gatekeeping in board game. Like, oh, well, like, you're not a real board gamer because you like to play Monopoly. What? I don't love Monopoly. But I would play it. Okay, I'm ranting about Monopoly. That's how you know I've lost the thread of what I was originally talking about. Talking about Monopoly actually brings me to the question of the day. So I would love everybody to answer this in the comments if you feel so inclined. I want to learn what your favorite board game is. My very first question of the day was kind of, what do you do? What's your thing? And a lot of people say they like to play war games and TTRPGs and things like that. I, though, play a lot of board games. If you play board games, I want to hear what your favorite one is. So let me know. You don't have to answer the question, but it's good for the algorithm. So tell me something. Speed paint's for the win. I mean, come on. So the next topic I wanted to talk about in regards to the Zombicide build is just kind of things I learned. If you're ever doing something where you're recreating elements for a board game, or specifically when there's a lot of components and a lot of rules to a game and you're creating your own custom bit, read the rules as thoroughly as you possibly can. I had played Zombicide a bunch and I read the rules and made a list of all the components I needed, but I didn't read the rulebook like so thoroughly because I missed a few things. I'm gonna put some like B-roll. I know this is supposed to be like a more casual vlog style video, but can't help myself. You need multiple cars. The car tokens are double-sided. There's a police car and the pimp mobile. And there are some scenarios, some missions that require two, either like pimp mobiles or cop car. This isn't a huge deal. I would have liked to have the number of cars that are needed because I'm extra and I want to have all the bits. I want it to be fully custom. But yeah, read the rules. Also, some of the objective tokens, which I made those little crates for, should have been able to be flipped face down so you don't see the color. There are green crates and blue crates that you use for specific missions. The way some of the missions work is you're supposed to put the tokens face down so that you don't know what color the crate is. I didn't realize that that was a thing that could happen. I can think of a lot of cool ways that I could fix that. It's just yet another example of why you should read the freaking rules. I consider myself a pretty thorough person, so I'm like annoyed that I missed that, even though it's not that big of a deal. Let me know if you like this mini painting and talking thing. I have an ungodly amount of unpainted minis. So, next topic for the Zombicide build. This is kind of under the category of things I would change if I could. I actually care a lot about craftsmanship. I went to art school and I always got pretty good grades in the craftsmanship department, With this medium, with terrain building and stuff, it's a lot harder. Kind of why I gravitate towards like gritty, post-apocalyptic, or otherwise just like dilapidated type of vibes, because it's very forgiving in way of craftsmanship. So I'm okay with how I handled my approach overall. However, there are some aspects of the craftsmanship that I would have liked to have gotten better. For example, the doors, they don't really fit. So if you recall, if you've watched either of the last 2 Zombicide videos, I made some doors to be taken in and out of the buildings. And I measured. Some of them I got like off by like a few millimeters, which unfortunately was enough to make a difference. Some are way off. So I don't really have a solution for that one, but I wish I had taken more care. On a similar note, like the doors don't really line up across the tiles. When I measured and marked all of the doors where they needed to be on all of the tiles, I didn't factor in the width of the material I'd be using. So where each wall lines up, sometimes the inner wall is nested in, sometimes the outer wall is kind of nested in. The foam board I made to construct the buildings is about 1/2 centimeter, so some of the doors are as much as a full centimeter off. It bothers me so much. But it works. I mean, you know, every time I play this, I'm just gonna have to like tell the people that are playing like, okay, this door leads to this door when the buildings are kind of like up against each other, because it's not super obvious. That was fast. I actually painted the alien base color already. Looks pretty good. It's not as dark as I thought. It is dark, but I'm gonna add some nice details to that. The boards were actually misprinted too. So when I took some measurements, it was actually really difficult to like know exactly like where all the doors line up and where all the streets and the sidewalks line up. There's also like a few other little craftsmanship things that I wish I had done better. The buildings sometimes overhang too far on the tile. So like if 2 tiles have to be up against each other, they might not fit nice. Like the street won't be flush because the buildings are overhanging where the street is. Constructing the buildings took a really long time. Like once I got to painting, it was really fun, and like I started in weathering, like it just got more and more fun. But the beginning, like batch kind of measuring all the foam for the buildings, I mean, it took months, and I was just ready to be done with it. So I think I blame that for why that is the case. But if I had planned maybe perhaps a little tiny bit better, yeah, that could have been avoided. Probably the biggest thing that I messed up in regards to craftsmanship is the bottom of all the streets are extremely warped. I absolutely should have used a different material. The foam board warped pretty badly. I'll show some photos here. One of the more annoying parts is that there were just some straight up doors and openings and layouts of buildings that were just wrong. So for example, on one of the tiles, the door was supposed to empty out into a certain zone on the street, and I put the door on a different part of the building. I used some sort of graffiti in the street to kind of rectify that, and I think it works. You know how they say measure once, cut twice? No, the opposite. Measure twice, cut once. Well, I did that. I'd say measure thrice. You can kind of never plan this stuff enough. And hey, you still might make mistakes. It's not that big of a deal. But it is something to keep in mind. If you're doing a huge project like this, it is a lot to keep track of. I don't really know what the moral of this point is, other than to say 2 things. It's okay, be easy on yourself. If you're doing a big project like this, it's fine. I'm not like losing sleep over this. But also, take your time with the planning, because this annoys me that I got this wrong. Another solution I had for this issue, where the layouts of the buildings on a few tiles were just completely wrong, I like made some hazard tape and closed off some of the doors that weren't actually supposed to be there at all. That's a detail that I actually think is cool, and it kind of worked out in my favor. Yeah, I thought that was actually a fun solution and looks pretty good on those tiles. So, any other regrets that I have for this? I'm asking myself. Yes, but don't worry. There's positive things that I'm going to say at the end as well. So one of them is I didn't spend a lot of time on the inside. The insides, they look cool. Some look cooler than others. Would have been a lot more work though. So I think ultimately I'm actually on the fence on like how much I should have paid more, but I definitely think I should have done something. I had already constructed them before painting anything. So like that is part of the reason why I didn't do it, because it was hard to paint the inside. I think the outsides just look so much more better. I'm really proud of how the outsides came out. I just don't have that same pride for the inside. But enough of the negative. I want to talk about some things that I feel I did really well. Overall, just completing this, humongous accomplishment. Because the very first thing I made was all the sidewalk. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna take me years. Once I came to that realization, I was like, I'm in it, I wanna do it, but can I? I don't know. So I'm really happy, I'm so proud of myself for that, because man, this was a behemoth of a project. So, you know, be proud of yourselves when you accomplish things, because it's really easy to be negative all the time. Especially as an artist, it's really easy to think you always could be doing something better. I think that's a good and a bad trait. I'm generally, I'll be honest, a pretty positive person, but that doesn't mean I think I'm the best. I don't. Like, I'm definitely not the best at mini painting. But I have fun with it. I'm positive. I like doing it. I'm not super worried about being the best. This little bit of paint on my wet palette kind of looks like a dog, like a Doberman or something. That's funny. I also am particularly proud of all the weathering and the details. Like, that's my bread and butter. That's what I love to do. I love to add the rust and the dirt and the leaves and the grass and the little tufts that I put everywhere. I mean, I could have added that like tenfold, but it would start to get ridiculous. I already added a lot of that. I think that's by far the most sort of like convincing part, is like the weathering and the vegetation. And by convincing, I guess I just mean like, it brings it across the finish line. It makes it look really realistic, in my opinion. I also learned a lot. I learned how to batch things out. Some of that was less glamorous than others, like I kind of mentioned at the top. Like, oh my God, it was such a slog in the beginning. I learned a lot of techniques to not do for that. Don't try to use clay kind of stamp things from Michaels to stamp in brick texture onto foam board, because it doesn't work that well. So would I recommend this to anybody, or to my past self? Yeah, of course. Of course I would. It was so fun. It was really fun. Just keep in mind all the things I mentioned, you know. Storage is probably the biggest one. That's something to keep in mind. That's probably the number one question I was asked, by the way, in the comments was, this looks really great. Where do you put it though? So what's next? Well, this will probably be the last project for Zombicide 2nd edition. I know there are a lot of expansions, but again, storage. And I wouldn't want to do the buildings in a different way, because then they wouldn't match and that would bother me. But I've wanted to play other Zombicides really badly. Maybe there's a way that I could do a different treatment for these other games. Like maybe I could just make some of the bits and bling it up a little bit. I've wanted so badly to play all of them, particularly Black Plague. I also think the Wanted, Undead, or Alive, the Western version, seems really neat and right up my alley in terms of theme. And lastly, the Invaders one looks cool. I don't hear that one talked about nearly as much, but it just aesthetically, I dig it. It would have to be smaller scale, but I would love to give it a shot. Let me know if you would like to see that, or if there are any other board games specifically that I could give a similar treatment. But if there are any board games where you'd like me to do a similar treatment, where I basically make a custom board of some kind or custom pieces of some kind, please let me know. Lastly, thank you to everyone who watched all of these Zombicide videos. I probably cannot say it enough. It's really cool. While I could talk hours about like validation as an artist and like where that validation comes from, and do I need external validation at all? Like, I don't know. I could talk about that forever, and I don't know where I land on it. But I do know it's nice to have validation. Do I need it? No. But it is nice to have a little bit of validation and support. I have tons of support from my family and my husband and friends, but it's cool to get unbiased support. Not that their support means less, but it's cool that this community has been really welcoming of me since I started this channel back in April. And this project, now that I'm wrapping this up, feels like a big moment, because I just, you know, it started things off for me. Anyway, enough of that sappy stuff. that's all I have for Zombicide topics. Now I guess I'm just gonna hunker down and finish up these minis. Cue the montage. Hey, me again. That's the base coat done. And now I'm gonna just add a few more details. What I like to do is use the speed paints, add some of the normal Army Painter war paint line, mixing it with the speed paints a little bit to make highlight colors. So cue another montage. And that's gonna do it for the minis. All I have left to do is apply some technical Astro Granite, which is what I based all the other Zombicide minis in. The end result is a little messy by like display piece standard, but I actually kind of like that. I mean, yes, it's also easier, so of course I would like it, but I like how these look. I'm happy with them. I say that a lot, but I really mean it. I'm pretty easy on myself. I'm easy to please. I just like making stuff.